Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you to this year's World Youth Alliance Youth Summit. My name is Kevin Orlando, the Director of Operations for the World Youth Alliance Africa. I will be your moderator, and I'm very excited to be here with you today. I'm particularly very happy with the overwhelming response we got for the summit this year, and the fact that we have representations from countries beyond East Africa. So if you're joining the Youth Summit for the first time and you believe that young people out here are making a difference in the world, then you're in the right place. Just to give a quick overview of the summit. So the Youth Summit is an annual program activity that the World Youth Alliance Africa hosts as a way of congregating young people who are committed to impacting society through creating person-centered initiatives. And these initiatives are pivoted on the acknowledgement of the inalienability and inviolability of human dignity. So this year, we have decided to bring the summit online due to the current global COVID-19 pandemic. And we have two amazing speakers who will be taking us through today's topic or theme, which is the role of youth in good governance. So for all of you who have joined, we would like to get to know you. So just kindly write your name and the country you're representing at the comment section. Also, tag your friends to join us today. Now, before we begin with the speakers, let us watch a short video clip about the work that we do at World Youth Alliance.
So I need your attention here, okay? We're going to talk about sustainable development.
I would say the vision of the World Youth Alliance is of personal excellence. You see all of these young people from all around the world. They care about others, they care about the world.
We all have the same mission because we all want to change the world. We all want to change our societies.
Everyone's talking about human rights, but no one knows why they're protecting them.
They're looking for answers. Who am I? Do I actually matter?
How can I really implement human dignity in my day-to-day life?
Just that idea that if you believe in something enough and you work hard enough, you can really change the world with something as simple as the idea of the dignity of the human person.
If you can teach people lessons of human dignity, there will be a lot less massacres or genocide. Which is why principles that WYA stands for, which is equality and dignity for every human being, is very important. Because unless you know why you're fighting for something, I don't think that goal can be achieved in the short term or even in the long term.
WYA is really making me see the beauty in a person despite everything else and making it something more than just ideology or a theory, putting it into practice and really kind of starting a revolution.
I think there is an urgency in terms of our work. I don't see anyone else doing the work the World Youth Alliance is doing. Freedom is this huge burden of responsibility, but also power in that sense, that through ideas, you're shaping your surroundings and trying to sculpt them towards something better.
Human dignity is how he is to improve himself for what is true and what is beautiful.
Definitely an urgent time to point out those inconsistencies in our different ideologies and show that we need to be consistently affirming the value of human life at all levels, otherwise we all become vulnerable.
Organizations like World Youth Alliance have to exist because there's a constant need for someone to stand up for the little guy, the person that has no voice, and that's what World Youth Alliance does.
Great. So with that short video, I believe everyone here now has an idea about the work that we do at World Youth Alliance. So if it's the first time you're joining us, we hope you'll learn a lot from today's summit and become part of the 1 million young people committed to promoting the dignity of the person. To read the charter and become a member of World Youth Alliance, just go to our website on wya.net/get-involved. So for all of you who just joined the live broadcast, welcome. Kindly send in your name and the country you're representing in the comment section. I'd like to give a quick shout out to some of the countries represented here today. So we have Mukesh Kumar, I hope I pronounced that right. Hi all from India. We have Dicksoni Emmanuel from Tanzania. We have Joachim Arikibe from Nigeria. Aaron Pittman from China, representing us from China. Gabire Ernest, well, I hope I'm pronouncing your names correctly, from Burundi. We have Frank Onyenka Onu from Nigeria. Farida Gitonga from Algeria. Quite a good representation. Areba Pingiri from Kenya. Sibongi Nkosi Abigail Moyo from Australia. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Kingsford Amoa. We have Enoch from Cameroon. Prudence from Zimbabwe. Nice of all of you to join us. We have Princess joining us live from Germany. We have Bima, I think that's Ndimbil Bima from Rwanda. Ntulage Haman from Uganda represented in the house. Chris Mwangi from Kenya. We have Ntulage Haman. Nice of you to join us. Fadili Deche from Kenya. Good of you to join us today. We have Munene Wanjau from Kenya. Great. We have Kipris Tatienina from South Africa. And I believe we have many more countries represented, as you see in the comments. So during the session, if you have any questions for our speakers about the topics, feel free to send them through the comment section as well. After the last session, then we'll call both of our speakers back to answer some of the questions that you have. Now, I'll move on to the next part of the program by introducing our first speaker for the day. And our speaker is Caroline Shisobili Maingi. So Caroline hails from Nairobi, Kenya. She studied political science for her undergraduate degree before taking philosophy and ethics for her master's in Strathmore University. She's also a doctoral fellow at the United States International University of Africa and currently lectures on philosophy and ethics at Strathmore University. So in 2003, she helped establish the WYA Africa Regional Office as a legal entity and led its expansion, recruitment, and fundraising as the first director. She now serves as an advisor and chair of the board for WYA Africa and also sits in the WYA International Board. So she recalls the first time she met Anna in New York, that was in 2000, during the Beijing +5 conference, as one of the defining moments that led her to opening the Africa office. She started volunteering with WYA and also took the WYA internship with Gustavo and Jesus, who will then be WYA Latin America's founding directors. So Caroline is a happy wife to her spouse and a mother to 3 boys and a girl. So join me in welcoming Caroline. Welcome, Caroline.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon from Nairobi. It's actually heading to evening. And from all of you, wherever you are, this is an international forum. I have just seen people from all over, Chad, Somali, Tanzania, Nigeria, Cameroon, Kenya, Burundi. To all of you, welcome. Welcome to the Alliance. If it's your first time, welcome to this session, this summit, which we have had to hold during these unique times, unprecedented times. I hope you're well. I hope your families are well. I know each and every one of us have been affected in one way or another. But if we are here on this call, it means we want something. We are looking for something. We want to do something. We want to do something for us and for our countries. So welcome. I'm gonna share a few thoughts on your contribution to good governance. Because each one of us being unique, we are able to do something. We need to discover that thing. We need to be able to do it. And probably now from this session, we get a few tips of what is happening and see where each one of us can make an impact. So the topic is youth contribution to good governance. Welcome. The first question to ask is, who am I? Ask yourself, who am I? I am a lecturer and I teach philosophical anthropology. Don't worry about that. But this is a question I also ask, who am I? Have you ever thought about that in the silence and quiet of your time? It's a very hard question sometimes to ponder and to be able to want to even give an answer to it. And there are 2 ways to look at this. Sometimes very quickly we just say, I am youth, I am a young person, I am a young professional, or you say, I am a daughter, I am a son, I am a sister, or I am a brother, a cousin, Or sometimes we say, I work at this place, or I study at this place or the other, or I do my own business, I occupy myself in the day doing this or that. Okay, so that's one way to look at this, this question. But there's another deeper way. Who am I? The first thing is I am a human being. Okay, I am human. And being human, I should behave like a human being. Being human, I am rational. I have intellect. I have will. I have a will. I am able to reason. I am able to think. I'm able to search for truth. And we are always searching for truth as human beings. I have a will. I am able to choose. Okay? Different types of freedom. Sometimes, right now during this pandemic, probably with quarantine and cessation of movement, and we are not free to move. But as a human being, I am free. By the fact that I am human, I am free. And therefore, I am able to make decisions, to choose. This is a great, great, great power. And we have to to use it well, responsibly even, you know. Who am I? I am a human being with dignity. This is what we have seen from the video. If you go to the World Youth Alliance website, the first declaration after the charter was to answer this question. A few pointers there which you want to look at. I am a social political being. I am interrelational. I reach out to the other. I want the other to reach out to me. I want to share my joys. I want to share my sorrows. I am because the other one is, and they help me to be. Okay. I know also during this pandemic time, we are not able to socialize as we have been or as we should as humans. But this is being a part of us, a great part of us. Okay. Answering this question, who am I? So to be able to participate in this whole aspect of good governance, we need to know ourselves. And we need to keep discovering ourselves, because as we grow, as we learn, as we get to meet people, we get to read, we discover more and more, and we become better. And we need to perfect ourselves. Okay? So moving on, to be able to contribute to good governance, I urge young people to get interested in what is happening around the world, what is happening in my environment, what is happening around me. Cultivate an interest in the national matters, in regional matters, in international matters. Find out how that affects you. Okay, you know, we had locusts in Africa, came all the way from the north to central to east. Right now, Corona has taken center stage. I sometimes have to think, oh, we had locusts and they're gonna cause hunger in addition to everything that is happening. Are you aware of this? Are you aware of your leaders in your country? Are you aware of what they are doing? How they are contributing to your country, to your being, to your society? We need to get interested. I say this because sometimes you ask young people, so did you hear what is happening in Uganda? Me being in Kenya. And they have no clue. And it is something that is, you know, big, that should call attention, that sometimes should make us worry, or, you know, we need to cultivate this interest if we want to take part in good governance. Because what are we going to govern if we don't know? If we don't know, okay? So how does that affect me? Sometimes as young people, we say, oh, that is happening in, I don't know, New York, where Naja will pass shortly. It doesn't affect me, I don't care. No, we cannot be parochial like that. It may affect us directly, indirectly, immediately, or otherwise. So if, I don't know, a policy has been moved in another country, let's say, I don't know, the Maputo Protocol, which is a document that affects us in African countries on reproductive health and affecting the culture of life. You want to worry and find out, oh, it happened in Maputo. Oh, did we take part as young people? Maybe it was not during our time, fine. But probably other things are going on, even in your country. Policy is being made. Are you aware? Are you interested? Are you taking part? Because sometimes we say, oh, you know, they don't put food on my table. And you're like, whoa, it affects the food that comes on your table. You just need to figure out how. And then if you know, you have the power to be able to impact. So find out how all these things affect you. During this corona, there has been issues of borders. Can Kenyans cross to Tanzania? Can Tanzanians cross to Rwanda? Can Rwandans and are Ugandans and Rwandans friends? If they're not friends, what's happening? Is Kenya and Tanzania friends? Do we have our diplomatic relations in place? And if it's not, what is going on? Do I know? Am I aware? What can I do to impact? Sometimes the impact is not, a big, huge miracle in space. No, it is just what you tell your friend, even what you tell your family members. Okay. How can I equip myself to be able to have some matter and form to be able to impact policy in contribution to good governance? As I said, be on top of news. It doesn't mean you spend hours and hours on CNN, Al Jazeera, Sky, and all our local. No. You maybe just need 15 minutes to get news updates in your country, in your neighboring countries, in your region. We have regional blocks in Africa, East Africa Cooperation, the SADC, the Commonwealth, the economic blocks, political blocks. Do we know them? AU, okay? Get the news. Who is at the helm? Whom can we talk to if we have an issue as young people? Read. I know with the new media, the digital world, we read very short sentences. You're told you're limited to, 100 characters. So we are used to that. And so we are not able to read sustainably, consistently, a 10, 15, 30-page document. Even for many of you here who are students on campus, we need to read. We need to still cultivate a reading culture. It's the only way our mind grows, widens, so that we are able to know what to say and how to say objectively. Okay? We need to study and have a critical mind to analyze things. The World Health Organization, for example, what have they pushed to your country? Is it good? Is it not good? Why? This donation, foreign aid, direct or indirect, is it good for us? Is it what we need? Have we taken part in acquiring it? Will it help us? Will it help my people? Will it help my village? Okay, I saw a participant here by the name Moyo. The other day I was reading quite a bit about Dabisa Moyo and her theories and thoughts on economy development in Africa. It's very interesting. You want to look at what she's saying, and then you look at what else other people have said, and be able to make up a rational decision to be able to act in this way or in the other way. Study and analyze the World Youth Alliance declarations and white papers. These are the things that are going to equip you to be able to participate effectively in good governance. Take up leadership positions in your areas, okay? And leadership could be you are, probably your family, there is a big birthday and you take charge. You coordinate that birthday. That's leadership. If you are on campus, a student in any institution, are you a leader? During my time, we used to call them class prefects. Other places call class president. Others, class representative. I have been a class representative since, primary, secondary. Even during my undergraduate, I was a class rep for my class and during my master's, and now I'm a class rep for my PhD class. Take up leadership positions. They don't have to be remunerated. It doesn't have to come with money. Sometimes it is it's from who you are, and that you develop the leadership skills, and leadership is a whole topic by itself. But as you take up leadership, you are uniting people. You're not dividing them. You need to talk to this one who is a bit loud, and this one can wait a bit, and that one who is a bit quiet, what do they have to say? And this one who has not contributed their share yet, and Then we have to be keen about our all-rounded formation. And of course, that's intellectual, which I have spoken about. You have emotional, okay? You have to surround yourselves with good people, good friends, okay? Family comes here, emotional formation, intellectual formation, spiritual formation, because we are transcendent beings. We aspire to some things that are beyond this world. We look around and look for and marvel at the creation and wonder wow, how beautiful. Where is this all from? Okay, we have to have human skills, physical, especially during this time. Are we able to exercise in one way or another? And in that way, we are molded, holistically. How can you equip yourself? Work either formal or informal, but do something. Because in working, it could be a formal job, employment, and or you have your own business. By working, you learn a lot. You work in teams. You develop, punctuality. You develop patience. You have to hand in assignments or a piece of report on time. You have to be honest with the employer's time, with your own time if you're an entrepreneur. So you learn a lot when you're working, even in the house, okay? And then in work and entrepreneur, I say you cultivate virtue. You have to learn to keep acquiring virtues vis-a-vis vices. You know what vices are, I'm sure. Virtues that build you up. Aristotle said, if a man is not virtuous, they are not fit to live in the polis, can't be in the city. If a man doesn't have virtues, they are not of integrity. They are not ethical. In fact, as Thomas Hobbes said, then they can be easily abused. Okay, so you have to elevate in any of these ways. So as we move on and probably finishing, how can you contribute to good governance? How can you contribute to good governance? Let's see. As I have said, take up leadership from the lowest probably to the highest, okay? From being even a leader of a book club, okay? You're the one who brings people together, who sends out the next book, the article, ask for contributions, to, being the national representative of whatever it is in your country. So take up leadership. Contribute your good ideas through media. So in media, you have to watch your language, you have to be factual, okay? Through sports, through arts, many different ways of expression. Can you draw? Can you sing? Okay? Through arts. Community service in your environment, in the area where you live. What do you do to contribute to good governance? Take up roles in promoting human flourishing. Where you live, is it clean? Can you mobilize for, a cleanup? Can you mobilize for, a community shop, market? Can you work with people to see that your environment is secure? Can you reach out to the local administration? How can you enhance human flourishing in your area? And this now grows to the bigger society, and the nation. And then family. Family, as you well know, and if you go back to World Youth Alliance documents, is, there's an emphasis that it's the basic foundation of society. In UN documents, in many constitutions, they speak about family. I know we are from various backgrounds and various forms of family. How is yours? How can you participate in your family becoming? Because it is the one place you begin being responsible, the one place you are who you are, the one place you get cultured. Okay, how can we promote family at the same time protect it? Can it begin with yours? Okay, by having these strong foundations, then you can be out there to speak with integrity, contributing to governance in whatever way. The ultimate is political leadership, for sure. Are you aspiring to be a member of parliament, young member of parliament? These are the foundations. So by the time you are coming out to speak to people, they are listening. They are like, wow. And they dig, and who is that person? And they find good stuff, and they vote you. And then you're able to impact policy at even that level. You're able to participate in what we call a cultural transformation. I can see someone here is asking, how do you fight nepotism? Because it prevents young people from contributing to leadership. Okay? You need to understand all isms, most of them, there's always to the exclusion of. Sometimes it's a big error, even in philosophy, in politics. Nepotism to the exclusion of, okay? One thing is to work out so that in any of these positions, you are appointed, elected on merit. And we have to speak about these things. I know sometimes as a young person, you're just beginning, and you have to begin from somewhere so that in another 5-10 years, someone can look back and say, I have experience. So one way is to speak out, to ask for being considered. You can't just sit back and say, oh, young people, we are not being, our issues are not being looked into. No. What have you done? You say, this is my contribution. So can you be met somewhere in the middle? So that we are just not making noise, we have something to offer. However little, however medium, however big. Okay? Family as a basic foundation of society, taking up leadership roles, working at knowing more of what is happening around me, around you, and all this together, we will impact. Get to know your constitution. What does it say on this matter? On matters, health, on matters sustainable development, on matters housing. What does my constitution say? What policies have been made to add to that constitution? Okay? Then by knowing, you're able to meet your member of parliament and tell them, by the way, this and this and this. Why propose this and this? How about? Okay? So I know we will have a bit more of discussion. I end there. I welcome us to be great aspirants to contribute to, governance, beginning from where we live, the societies we live, where we stay, all the way to the international, to aspire to work out of your country. Thank you very much. My name and email address probably can be shared. So whoever wants to reach me, just in case, in these times of digital, can disappear any minute, especially in Africa. We have a lot of issues with internet. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Caroline, for the wonderful presentation. To our audience, if you have any questions for Caroline, please write them down in the comment section, and we shall address them during the Q&A session later. So if you've just joined us Also, as our speaker was making her presentation, kindly comment with your name and your country on the comment section. Also, write down your questions on the comment sections. So great. I'll move on to our next speaker for the day, who is Nadia Wolf. So Nadia has served as a World Youth Alliance Director of Advocacy since 2015, overseeing the organization's advocacy efforts and representing the World Youth Alliance at the United Nations. She's a graduate of Washington and Lee University and William and Mary Law School. She's a native of Massachusetts and is a member of the Massachusetts Bar Association. So please join me in welcoming Nadia Wolf. Welcome, Nadia.
Hello, thanks Kevin for the introduction. And it's so nice to be with you all. It's kind of incredible that in some ways all this difficult situation, which I don't want to make light of at all, but it is enabling some of these great conversations across borders using this technology that otherwise I don't think I could probably get to Kenya or get to other parts of Africa just for this one meeting, although I had the great pleasure of being in Nairobi last November for the ICPD Plus 25 Nairobi Summit. And also I was able to go to West Africa as a university student. So I know there's a lot of the continent left, but I'm really glad to see people from all over it as well as from outside of it here. So I've been asked to kind of explain some about international law and the impact in national policies. In WYA's work, we're trying to do two things. We're trying to kind of oppose the things that we don't support, and also, of course, promote things that we think are good. I've been told I speak a little fast, so if I'm getting fast, I trust someone else will let me know. I'll try to keep it a little slower. I lived in New York now for about 6 years, and it's a fast talking part of the U.S. So apologies. I will try to slow down. Keep it there. The first thing I just want to do is I want to hit a good balance where we're not so technical that if you don't have any sort of law background, you're not going to get overwhelmed, but also that you do get kind of a decent understanding of where laws come from and how those influences can happen. So when it comes to international law, we really have two sources that we're looking at, and those are treaties and custom. You probably have heard of treaties. Your countries have all signed treaties, I guarantee. And those are really the major one right now. Custom still matters, but a lot of the areas of customary law have now been put into treaties. So we'll focus mostly on treaties. Treaties are basically like contracts between countries. There can be treaties just between two countries. There can be treaties that are open to every country. That would be a lot of the human rights treaties, which are ones that we focus on. But they have to be between countries. So every now and then I get an email, would WYA like to support this treaty? It's just a gesture. We are not part of international law traditionally refers to countries. It's the law between nations. Now in the human rights era, we can really have some accountability for individual people, but for the most part, it's between countries. So that's your first part of a treaty, right? It's got to be between countries. Then it has to be an agreement between those countries. Obviously, if you don't agree on the provisions, you're not making some sort of mutual obligations. And then also that agreement has to be binding, and you have to know it's binding. So you might hear, oh, the UN adopted this declaration, oh, we have this agreement here. But if it's not a treaty, it's not binding, which means countries are not obligated to uphold it. So can you and I sign treaties symbolically, but we're not countries. Are UN declarations treaties? No, they are declarations of political will. They certainly can be influential, but they're not intended to be binding. None of the countries understand them to be binding. They might say, okay, come on, we agree to this, let's do it, as a kind of social or political pressure, but there's no legal force there. In terms of what the treaties say, you might hear, all sorts of things. Oh, there's a human right to this. There's a human right to that. There's this is a right. This is a right. Some of that's true and some of that's not accurate. So when it comes to the treaties, if you've ever tried to get a large group of people, not even countries, people, to agree on something, you might have noticed you end up at the least or the lowest common denominator. Right? I'm from a big family. I remember like a 40-minute discussion on what pizza to order once. And that was just, among my siblings. And we were disputing quite a bit what we should get. Now, if you imagine a whole lot of countries who are saying, okay, we think this is an important topic, we really want to address this, but they're all going to come at it from different perspectives. So what you have is a situation where really it's not maybe going to be as ambitious as you might want, okay? And sometimes that's discouraging, but it also allows kind of a great pluralism that happens when you allow, when you have that thing that truly is an area of agreement and you recognize that there can be different ways of achieving the same goal. So this is actually something that we talk about in our certified training program, which if you've done, this will be a refresher on chapter 7, which I always say is the best chapter because it's the one that I teach our interns. But also really it comes down to our ideas of like who the person is, right? So all of these things are reflecting who the person is. And in chapter 7, we have a couple of pieces that discuss the various human rights traditions, but also really discussing where documents like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights come from. What are they reflecting? And you might be interested to think, oh, well, it's a declaration. It's actually not a treaty. Even though it's now highly influential, maybe we would say it has become customary law because so many states have agreed to it and understand it to reflect binding obligations. But that dispute, those agreements there were come to listing about 30 articles of areas of agreement, but not a shared philosophy or idea of why there was that agreement. So all of that is to say that as we go through this, we have to think about what are the whys, as Carol was talking about. It's not just about what's in the treaty, but why is it there? And what are we saying about who the human person is? So WYA our areas of focus are areas often where we see that understanding of the human person distorted. And so when we're thinking about these treaties, I want that to be in the back of your mind. We're not going to go through every treaty. There's a million of them. I'll talk about a few key provisions. We focus on areas related to reproductive health, to education, development, areas where we see that sometimes the human person is not treated as the subject of their own story, somebody who can contribute, who's a problem solver and an innovator, but as someone who kind of has appetites to be managed or environmental impact to be mitigated or things like that. So it all kind of comes together in that why. And so I want you to think about that. Is the human person someone who has value before any government recognizes it, before any rights are codified? Or do they receive those rights from a government or from the state itself? It really is a what comes first sort of mentality. And for WYA, we think it's the former, and that is why there is an obligation to respect these, and that's why we should be embarking on this international project. It should be guided by that principle. And so in our areas, we're really looking at, is that guiding principle being respected? Is the dignity of the person central to this? Are we treating people like subjects, not like objects or things? So in our areas, I have a few treaty provisions, but I do want to kind of focus on this idea of how international law impacts national policies. So when you have countries come together and they agree on these treaties, there's not a lot of ways of enforcing a human rights treaty. A lot of it's very voluntary. So what ends up happening is that countries can get some feedback. Hopefully they're willing to accept, the things that are valid. But a lot of it also comes through other relations. Some of the treaties that that come up in our work a lot and treaty provisions relate to things like, as I said, health, education, right to life, things like that. I'm going to use as an example kind of reproductive health and kind of walk you through it. If you're familiar with WYA's charter, you understand our positions on some of these things. In international law, we do have a right to life in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. We have a right to the highest attainable standard of health in the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. We have equality in family planning and family size decisions for women and the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women under kind of healthcare rights. We have guidance for parents and family planning, education, and services in the Convention on the Rights of the Child. That's really geared at families to help them have healthy children and have a healthy family life. And we have the only mention in a global treaty of reproductive health is actually just part of a non-discrimination clause in healthcare in the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So you might have heard things like women's rights are human rights, women's rights include abortion, women have a right to contraceptives, and we have to really promote that. But actually, in terms of global documents, it's really not there. So in that case, we can get a lot of misinformation happening here. Interestingly, in the Africa region, you have a lot of countries that are pretty traditional and very, very respectful of the right to life in terms of national legislation. You've got 54 countries. I think only 4 have very open access to abortion. Most are fairly restrictive. And yet, this is the only region that has a treaty that really recognizes a right to abortion, and it's put that under the health clause, and it's interpreted it very broadly. Basically, when you have an exception when you have a law that allows for abortion on the basis of health, most countries where that takes place interpret health extremely broadly. So it's not a meaningful limitation in any real sense. A lot of countries have signed it, but not changed their laws on that topic. Some have reservations on it. Reservations allow a country to basically sign a treaty, but say on this particular provision, we have our own understanding or we have our own treaty there. And so you might think, well, how did a region which is generally very different in this area end up with that sort of treaty provision? And that is outside influence for the most part. There certainly are local supporters in countries of those provisions. I don't want to erase them. But it's really important to understand that particularly in developing countries, there's a lot of pressure on these topics in particular. And a lot of it comes down to things that are not actually part of international law unless they can force it in through those treaties. So if none of these actually have any sort of definition of reproductive health, where does all that come from? Why is it that that's the thing we're always talking about? For WYA, we don't just want to talk about that. We have other ideas, but it's something that we come across a lot. And it actually comes from something that isn't a law at all. As you recall, I mentioned that we have declarations. We also have kind of conference outcomes. Things like the Sustainable Development Goals, the Millennium Development Goals are not treaties, but they have been pretty influential. And we also have something like the International Conference on Population and Development. For those of you in Nairobi last November, you might have noticed a lot of traffic around the hotel in the center of the city as a lot of people gathered there to discuss this on its 25th anniversary. That doesn't create anything, but it kind of recognized certain aspects and directed a lot of development priorities and funding. And what that document said on this topic was reproductive health, relates to various aspects of health of the reproductive system and sexual health. It talked about abortion, but it recognized that countries have the right to put their own laws in place on that topic. So that was pretty much a compromise solution. There were some countries that were very dedicated to promoting it as a right, and other countries that said that's not part of our culture, our traditions, or our laws. It's not in the documents. And what we ended up with was this compromise that basically said, if it's legal, it should be safe, at least for the mothers. If we should try to reduce the number that occur, prevent causes that lead to that, help women not have, multiple abortions, and it shouldn't be a method of birth control. And then also a recognition that laws on that can only be changed through the national legislative process. And yet you'll see a lot of kind of international pressure on this, despite that recognition, which actually shows that it's not a right at all in international law, because you don't get to like set your own laws on things that we all agree are a requirement, right? We wouldn't say, oh, well, torture is not allowed, but you can set your own national policies on torture, right? We don't have that sort of recognition. And yet in that time since then, that document has been used to really promote those things and pressure. And actually, whatever your feelings are on the topic, it really becomes a big distraction from things that I think there is a lot of agreement in other areas. So then that kind of raises the question, well, why does that matter? You just told us that it's not a treaty, it's not, it's not enforceable, none of this is actually in international law. Well, so let's talk a little bit about how those things actually do have an impact. First of all, treaty enforcement is hard, as I said a few minutes ago. I always tell my interns the traditional way of enforcing a treaty is to go to war, which we don't want. We're trying to avoid in this kind of post World War II kind of human rights era. It's a good thing, and of course it's really tricky to figure out what's going to be the best outcome. So the idea is really in this era that we're going to kind of work together to move towards and make progress on these core areas of agreement. And one of the ways that they do that is through treaty monitoring bodies. Treaty monitoring bodies are committees of experts from around the world who've been selected to help provide feedback to countries on those treaty obligations. In terms of treaty monitoring bodies, basically what happens is usually it's every 4 years, I want to say, for a treaty like the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. So that committee will take reports from countries it's like on a 4-year cycle, and they'll read it and they'll ask some questions and they'll give some feedback. Now that feedback is our recommendations, which means that they are not binding. And that feedback can be pretty helpful. It might say, these are the areas we think you need to work on. This is what you've done well. Here's some improvement. But also sometimes it really goes beyond what the treaties say. So you might have somebody who has decided that the right to health includes this other practice, even though it's not agreed. And if that is taken very seriously, or it can be used to promote things that actually are not an obligation. And so there's some pressure that comes there. And it can also be used to justify kind of other pressure. The other thing, of course, is that sometimes you do have actually have problematic treaties. As I mentioned, the Maputo Protocol, when it comes to things like abortion, most countries in Africa are very much limited, pretty much life of the mother, and maybe a couple other exceptions depending on the country. A few countries do have pretty expansive laws. But what you have is this kind of cyclical nature where in order to bypass the local democratic processes, sometimes there's an appeal to an outside authority or an outside treaty. So in 2015, Sierra Leone finally ratified and finally joined fully the Maputo Protocol. They deposited that ratification document at the end of October. By early December, there was a bill saying, based on that treaty, but also all these other treaties that I mentioned that actually don't have anything about abortion, here's how we have to permit abortion. And so it was only resistance from people on the ground, actual, cultural leaders and citizens who said, but we don't actually want that. Otherwise, that was being used to basically sidestep the democratic processes. And actually talking to the people about what their priorities were. There were parliamentarians who supported it. It did pass through, but the public outcry kind of showed that it wasn't something that enjoyed broad support. And yet, in order to bypass that process, they were going above through the treaty process. The other thing that happens is that you might have kind of inaccurate promotion of what those things are, not just by parliamentarians in a country, but also international institutions, big international not-for-profit or non-governmental organizations. Sometimes governments also will kind of try to use international processes to promote things. I observed a country in negotiations at the UN was actually promoting contraceptives over family planning, even though family planning can include contraceptives, because they had a controversial bill at home. And so when they were hoping that if they got contraceptions in at a UN document, then at home, they could say, oh, well, look, the UN said we should do this, even though it wasn't a binding document at all. And even though they were actually pushing for that change, they were kind of giving themselves political cover to avoid the fact that it was something that public funding of that was controversial in their own country. The other thing that comes up is that, again, these are, actually, can I get my slide on the policy cycle framework? So this is a framework that we use at WYA to kind of explain why the policies also have a big impact. Okay. Now, sometimes this is done well, right? Maybe we have a policy on health and sanitation. Some development aid organization puts in funding for that. We build a lot of clean water systems in a country, and then that was successful, so it comes back around to policy. That's actually really good. But that's also pretty much in line with the treaty obligation. In terms of our work, what we see is that sometimes policies adopted on controversial topics also drive that funding. And so if a country wants to have a health program, they might say, okay, we need vaccines and we need maternal health care and better, clean water and things like that. But what the country funding them says is, we think you should be legalizing abortion, or we think you need, we're not going to give you money for those other things unless you also have a comprehensive contraceptive policy where you're making sure that everybody has that. And so it's really challenging, because I know that there are definitely areas where every country in the world can improve and needs that feedback. And you can understand also, a donor country wants to put their money in things that they think are going to be effective. But how do you manage that and make sure that it's not actually just co-opting national legislative processes, that actually it is things that reflect that reflect our ideas. So the end result is that there's a lot of pressure on national governments to adopt laws, policies, and programs, some of which are in line with their obligations, but some of which aren't. And so that's where it's really important to understand what's the actual source of this. So we've had a treaty monitoring body tell Kenya, you have to provide abortion and contraception, including to children, like teenagers. And here's, that's required by this article of this treaty, but when you actually look at it, it doesn't include it. So that's where really kind of doing your homework and holding your leaders accountable is really important. So I don't want to go on too long. I think I'm kind of hitting about my 20-minute topic, but I think this is the sort of thing where as a young citizen of your country, you want to be engaged. You want to see what are your actual what does your country actually pledge to do? Are those things, are the actions that they're taking to implement that in line with their values, in line with what their obligations are? Are the representations that you're hearing of what international law is, are those actually accurate? And what are the ways in which pressure can be used both for good causes and for bad causes? And are there things which are maybe challenging, or as Carol kind of hinted at, maybe there are ways to look at kind of building some more of that independence so that there really is a lot of local ownership, because I think that's something that we really support at WYA, is that it shouldn't be kind of this external top-down kind of control over that, but it really has to come from the people and address what they want and see people as problem solvers. So we really have to challenge these inaccurate interpretations and these inaccurate statements of law. We have to ask leaders to kind of hold the line in terms of what your countries actually want, and then you actually have to hold those leaders accountable as well to respect national law and people's values and, of course, human dignity. So I will stop there, and I think we've got some questions, so thank you for your time.
Well, thank you so much, Nadia, for that enlightening presentation. I'm sure everyone here has learned quite a lot from your presentation. Now, before we proceed to the Q&A, I'd like to call back on screen Carol, our first speaker. Great. So I see we have a couple of questions that have come in. So we'll just flash them on the screen and then I can read them for our speakers. Great. So the first question from Innocent Wakida. In my country, there's a complete disregard of policy, international law, and human rights. An example is the manner in which the police arrest suspects. How best can we get involved and make sure policy is implemented and human rights are observed while also holding leaders accountable?
Wow. Yeah, that's, that's sometimes we have that in my country too, which is a big challenge. I think some of it is going to be local to each country. So I can't just say from the US, I do work in an international context, but you're an expert on your country and you understand what works there. I think I would say a couple of things. First is drawing attention to those things. I'm sure that you have some media. It might take a lot of courage to do that. But kind of highlighting those things. The other thing is I'm guessing that Uganda is a signatory to some treaties and that certainly is not allowed under international human rights law. So that might be a grounds to kind of make that argument. Another option is that when Uganda submits its reports to its treaty monitoring body, this is a good use of the treaty monitoring body, that's a clear violation of some of the obligations that they have. My guess is that it's probably under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. There are opportunities where non-governmental organizations can submit what's called shadow reports, highlighting some of those issues. So you can say, actually, we have this instance, etc. And also, I think, there is a great need for solidarity, for convincing people that it's worth their time to oppose it and that there is a way of doing it better. I don't know what that's going to look like 100% in the Ugandan context. I don't know if Carol has some ideas as being somebody who's probably a much better specialist on the region. But I think a lot of times it takes significant courage and honesty and a willingness to tell the truth. There's some great stuff in our certified training program, if you haven't done it, about leaders in Poland in the Solidarity movement. Also, we have a reading from Václav Havel about truth and kind of making sure that we don't just accept not only the official line, but the official lies that kind of come out about some of those things. So that's maybe not as detailed of an answer, but I would say in general, challenging untruth when you hear it, highlighting and criticizing those wrongs on a firm basis, both about the dignity and also about the human rights setup. I'm sorry I don't have some better advice, but I'm in solidarity with you and will keep you kind of in thought because I know it's big challenges.
Okay, thank you so much, Nadia, for the response. The second question. So we have a question from Munene. Corruption has been a menace in Kenya for quite some time now. How can we as youth make sure it's dealt with effectively? I believe this goes to Carol.
Okay, thanks, Munene Wanjau. I think let's begin from a very basic level. And I go back to the person, begins with me. Very simple things like do not lie, like just even in family. Your cousin can call and you say, I'm not at home, and you're at home. But, okay? And then your boss will call and you will say, I am on my way, and you haven't left the house, or you're not any near the office, okay? So it begins with us. So that's one. Another thing is to act within the reasonable law that there is. So, for example, also very ordinary, we have had secession in Kenya. Lack of movement from county to county, or quarantine, or we are required to wear masks. Wear the mask, because if you're caught, the police will want to take you to jail or to extort you, and you will be tempted to just give a little so that you go away. Drive on the right side. Do not overlap. All those small things that don't make you vulnerable to be able to participate in corruption. So it begins with you. Some of your young professionals, you're already working, you can smell corruption. Don't take part. Find a way to blow the whistle. Of course, you have to make sure you're secure, human preservation. If I say this, will they come for my family? So you have to check all that. So if it means even taking up the matter to the police, involve some legal people, how can we handle this? Write about it, write in the papers, but make sure you have your facts right. And then you expose the matter in a way that people are able to know, hey, here, but you don't take part. Yeah, it begins with us. Thanks, Wanjau. One quick example in Kenya was this university in Masai Mara. The gentleman who was in the accounts office and saw how management was extorting the university, and he had to find a way to expose. So it is true the culprits may not have seen the light of the day yet, but conversation is begun. And this was a young accountant. So yes, you can do something. Don't take part. Thank you.
I think I should have had Cynthia answer the last question, because I think she made a really good point that I missed, which is, as much as, what's in your control is what's in your control, right? You're not going to be able to make everybody else change their behavior, maybe ever, but hopefully over time you can convince and more people will support. But the first thing is just to as much as you can, to conduct yourself with integrity, which I think is a great point that Carol made there. So that also applies, I think, to the previous question.
Thank you so much, Carolyn and Nadia. Now, our next question from Adrian. So my question is more towards implementation. I've heard that presence of implementing structures encourages governments to choose one policy over another. For example, the vast presence of Maristop clinics in Kenya give them leverage to push for policies at local and national level. Must we too get into implementation somehow with our limited resources, or are there ways to overcome this barrier and get good policies in place as well? Yeah, in place.
Yeah. I think that's more at me. Yeah. Maybe we can get the slide back up on the policy cycle framework. You've really hit on something there, Adrian. You're really correct. If they're the ones on the ground with a plan, then the people saying, no, that's bad, we have limited influence, right? Because there's a problem. There's definitely issues all over the world, but I know Kenya is particularly focused on maternal health, reproductive health, things like that right now. And if we're only saying no on the bad policy, but we don't have an option, then that is a problem. You're 100% right. When it comes down to it, somebody who's got a plan that they can implement, even if we don't like the plan, they're going to have a big influence there. And so that is something that WYA has been working on. We are not in the position to do all the funding, so a lot of my work is on the policy level, just to keep it open for the sorts of policies that we think will do better, and not kind of focus on only the controversial things. But that implementation is important, and that's why WYA has developed kind of alternate programs, so that we're not just saying no to a bad idea. We're actually saying this is a better idea. And two of those things are, one is in reproductive health, and that's our sister organization, FEM, which stands for Fertility, Education, and Medical Management. It's not just about pregnancy or avoiding pregnancy, achieving pregnancy, but also about overall health, about education, and really about helping doctors to provide women the care that we need. Because right now, a lot of times if a woman has some sort of problem, she doesn't get a real solution. She might get some help with symptoms, but that's about it. And we also have a program to address issues with comprehensive sexuality education. I didn't talk about that today. If you look at the content, like the name sounds good, like it's comprehensive, it's education, children need to know some of these things, but the actual content has some stuff that a lot of people would not be comfortable with kids learning. So WYA has put together the Human Dignity curriculum. Kevin and our other colleague from Africa, Cynthia, have both been involved in implementing it and working with some partner schools in the region. And that's great because, again, it's taking that step back and saying, who is the human person? And then we understand our responsibilities towards each other, to ourselves, for respect, and kind of integrate a healthy sexuality into it rather than kind of understanding our whole selves in light of sexuality. So you're 100% right. And we have some programs on that. And if you have ideas for things in your community that are needed, then you're 100% right that, to partner and bring some of those ideas forward, because when it comes down to it, whoever's got, here's our plan ready to go, they're going to have a leg up versus those of us who are if we're only saying no.
Okay. Thank you so much, Nadia. So we'll move on to the next question. Great, we have a question from Princess. So she says, the external top-to-down support in Liberia has influenced the drive of youth advocacy. How can you maintain a fight for a particular cause that's ignored by international donors? For example, I'm a founder of Mental Care Liberia, and it's a challenge to get government and international support on creating change. So I'll let any of you comment on this.
Okay, I can go first.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Princess, for that question. We all now have to accept that mental health is quite an issue at the moment, I think the whole world over. And the situation we are in now with the pandemic is not helping at all. In my country, for example, the Ministry of Education, the minister just said we lost a whole year, academic year, and students are affected in very many different ways. So I think we just have to keep at it. Go to bodies and foundations that have grants and check if anything falls under mental health care. And we have to keep applying for them. We have to keep writing about it and just bringing it to the government's attention. Somebody will hear. Nadia?
Yeah, I think Caroline covered most of what I would say. I think when it comes to mental health, the whole world is playing catch up, right? Like it's not like something that anybody has solved. And a lot of people, it's hard to understand, even though it's an illness like any other illness. It seems like, well, why can't you just choose to be happier, if somebody's depressed or things like that. So I think there's a lot of education that you may have to do before you get steam on that, pick up steam and can do it. But yeah, so I think educating and sensitizing people to the problem and then looking for grant opportunities and learning how to write things that will direct that money towards you. I think there will be more money coming towards that in the future because I think there is growing awareness that it's a big need. But good for you for trying to tackle that. You're doing something that really is important and matters in your country.
Great, thank you so much. We'll take a couple of more questions and then we can finish the broadcast for today. So the next question is, how do we make governments accountable to the people? I believe this goes to Caroline.
Thanks very much for that question. How do we make governments accountable? The first thing, please always get the facts right so that you're not operating on fake news. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's possible. to get the facts right. Then, various ways, write about it in the local media. People have used the social digital platforms to bring out issues.
Great. Our next question. So we've kind of tried to summarize these questions. We have so many comments in the comment section, so we're trying to summarize a few of the questions so that we finish also in good time. So how can WYA help young people so that they can shape policy decisions for the sake of youth, children, and women?
Well, it looks like Carolyn will probably be back in a minute, so I guess this one's on me. I think one of the things, of course, that we do is educating young people. We have a great program called the Certified Training Program. Kevin and Cynthia are both involved in providing that. We're also training more and more people to help spread it more and more. And that really gives you the philosophical understanding of why we held why our charter says what it does, why we prioritize human dignity and the things that flow from that, and how that should play out in policy and culture. So if you haven't done the Certified Training Program, it's a lot of reading. Okay, some of it's challenging. I have never taken a philosophy class, so chapter 2, and I really had to work together a lot. It took a long time, but it really is worth it. The other thing is we are looking into ways, we're testing it out now. It's not available yet, but we are looking to provide more advocacy training to more people. So keep an eye out for announcements on that. It's not fully ready to go yet, but we are trying to then what we do is we apply those ideas into the policy sphere. If you want, a lot of that, however, is based off of our white papers, and those are available on the website. So if you go to wya.net/research, you can see all the legal arguments. It's reflecting our philosophy, but it's in those legal terms, explaining things on some of these areas where we see a lot of distortion, really about who the human person is. So I consider them kind of the practical application of all the stuff that's in the CTP, the Certified Training Program. Chapter 7 in particular talks about law. So it kind of gives you that philosophy of law and the different understandings of why we have human rights, what they're supposed to do. And then that practical application in some of these hot button topics, many of which do pertain, they all pertain to the whole world, but a lot of development aid is directed at Global South, which is a weird designation that isn't always South, including Africa, because there's a lot of development aid going there. And so what are those policies going to be, and why should they be a certain way? There's a lot of opportunities there.
Great, thank you, Nadia. I think we're going to end with the Q&A session here. So just to emphasize, if you have not yet joined the World Youth Alliance, please go to our website, wya.net/get-involved, and sign the charter to become a member. Also, sign up for the Certificate Training Program. Right now, applications are open for the next upcoming batch, which starts in September. So sign up and do the training, and I promise you, you'll learn so much in the training. Then finally, just to close off, I would like to give a special thank you to our wonderful speakers, Nadia and Caroline. Caroline is back. Yes, so I'd like to give a special thank you to our wonderful speakers, Caroline and Nadia, and to our Director of Marketing and our Regional Director Cynthia and Demi, who are working behind the scenes to ensure that we have a wonderful broadcast. So, great. So just to join, thank you so much. I was got a bit confused there. So we'll be sending you a short evaluation just after this broadcast. I'm sure it should be flashed on the screen for a few minutes. Just help us out by filling out this evaluation form just to enable us to make the online programs a bit better. Also follow us on Instagram and Twitter using the handle @WYA Africa. And if you've not liked our Facebook page, also just go ahead and click the like Facebook button so that you can always get information on what is happening in the region. So again, thank you all and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks so much for having us.